Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome back. Welcome back to the PorscheCooled Podcast. My name is Michael Barth. If you haven't been here before, this is Owner Stories. Owner Stories episode of the PorscheCooled Podcast. Owner Stories is where I connect, where I chat with other Porsche enthusiasts, other Porsche owners around the world. They might have a Cayman, they might have a Boxster, they might have a 911, they might have multiple Porsches in their garages, or even own multiple Porsches over the previous years. So this is all about you guys. This is all about your story. This is where I get to learn more about different Porsche models. Actually, I kind of like it because I don't know everything. I know some of you guys think that I have all this knowledge. I actually don't know everything. I don't know that much at all, really. But I'm learning along the way, and I enjoy it. It's enthusiasm. It's the community, and I really like this part of the. I really do like this part of the podcast. Of course, you guys who have been here before know the other part of the podcast is Fridays with Steve. Fridays with Steve is where Steve is my mate in Sydney, owns a 997 GT3, and we just chat about all things Porsche. Sometimes we ramble, but we ramble in the Porsche way. Anyway, today we have another good one coming up for you. I'm going to have Josh connect with me very shortly by Zoom. Josh is coming in from the US. He's in Seattle, I believe. Josh has owned couple of Porsches. Josh and I have been trying to hook up and organize this owner story for some time. I did cancel on Josh, I think, in Bahrain when I was in Bahrain. But we've managed to organize it. We've managed to schedule a time. So Josh is going to join me shortly. As I always say, if you want to be on the owner stories, I eventually get through all the messages that come to me. But if you want to be on owner stories, just send me a DM through PorscheCooled. PorscheCooled is the Instagram of the podcast, the Instagram of PorscheCooled. Also, give us a follow if you haven't already. Just send me a DM on PorscheCooled and tell me that you'd like to be on owner stories. Just let me know what car you've had or what cars you've had in the past. And then we'll take it from there. It takes me a few weeks to get you scheduled. But eventually I will get you a slot and we'll start talking on the podcast. Okay, that's enough for now. Let me get Josh, let me get Zoom turned on, let me get Josh on the line, and let's start talking about his PorscheCooled owner story. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to Owner Stories. I didn't say in the intro, actually, this is number 60. And as I mentioned before, today I'm going to be joined by Josh, and Josh is here now, and Josh is coming in from Seattle in the US. It's early in the morning there in Seattle. It's a bit later in the evening here in London. Good morning, Josh. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you today?
I'm really well. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I just said to the listeners before I got you on, I've kind of cancelled on you a couple of times. We've kind of been going around and around in circles to get you on Owner Stories. It's good that you're actually here now, so we can have a good chat about your Porsche journey, because you've owned a couple of Porsches, which we'll get into. Let's just get straight into it, though, Josh. Let's just get straight into the podcast, because I think we have quite a lot to chat about.
Sure.
I always like to start the podcast where it all began. You know what I mean? Like where your first memories of Porsche began. And if there are any first memories, sometimes, it happens later in life. It doesn't happen so earlier in life. Was there a time in your life where you started noticing Porsche? Like when you were a kid? Was your dad into them? Did you have an uncle that drove a Porsche? How did it all sort of start for you? When did you first start noticing Porsche?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I don't remember the exact day when my old man brought it home, but one day he brought home a Guards Red 86 930 Turbo with black leather interior and Fuchs wheels with color matched Fuchs wheels. And I don't remember the day he brought it home, but I remember my first ride in that car. And it was, the first time I felt what a fast car was. And it was, just a really kind of visceral and different experience from, the cars at the time, in the late 90s.
So he bought that car? That was a car that he bought?
Yeah. And so he had, that Guards Red 930 Turbo for about maybe like 10 years. And it started as just like a street car. And then, as I'm sure people start tracking their Porsches and their 911s, and he slowly made it into, a track car. And it was just like a monster. And I'm sure it sounds kind of crazy or funny today to talk about like making a 930 Turbo into a track monster, because the values of them have gone through the roof, and no one's doing that anymore. But this is at the time when, gas was cheap and old Porsches, nobody wanted them. And this thing got like 8 miles per gallon at the time. It was like right before, gas prices in the US went through the roof. So he got it for like, I think at the time, like 30 grand, which, crazy. And he ended up selling it like, for about that much a couple years later. The funny thing, sorry, my dog is barking at the Amazon delivery guy. Had he held on to the car for like, a couple more years, he could have paid for my college tuition with it.
But I guess that's the good side of it, right? Because there was, like you said, there was a time where people didn't really want Porsches because of the fuel economy. There was a period there, I'm sure, where people didn't really want turbos either. There was that sort of anti-turbo thing that happened, But also the fact that you as a kid, your dad had this car. I'm guessing you were reasonably still quite young. Your dad had this car, and he's experienced it to the fullest, right? Which I think you pinpointed it, very clearly. Like now today, people aren't getting that enjoyment out of their car because they're so worried about the value of it. Because either they bought it really cheap and now it's worth so much, or they bought in so high that they're just too scared to do those sort of things to it. So he made it into a fully fledged sort of track car, did he?
Yeah, and it's funny. Just again thinking about this time period now. I remember going to like track days with him as a kid, at Porsche Club events, and seeing people. This was at the time when a 996 was a brand new car, and he was racing alongside Carrera GTs on the track. Wow. Which again today, like thinking about like a 930 turbo on a track with a Carrera GT racing very casually in a Porsche Club, just like what? That's crazy.
Yeah, that's something you want to see. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It was a loud track that day.
Okay, so your dad how long did your dad have the 930 Turbo for? Quite a while?
I think he had it for like maybe 10 years. He bought it and sold it, I guess, either just right or just wrong, depending on who you ask. But he bought it like at the bottom of the market and sold it not shortly thereafter. And seriously, I think like a year or two after he sold it, that's when the values went crazy.
Really.
Which, and no regret on his side of things, and I guess I should give some more context there. He sold it, I think shortly after or before my 16th birthday, which in the US is when you get your learner's permit. Yeah. And he said to me, it was like, either I sell the car and get rid of it and get money for it, or I keep the car and I'm going to have to pull you out of the car, wrapped around a tree. And I don't want to do that.
So that was the reason. So he didn't buy. So there's no other Porsche. He didn't buy another Porsche after that. He didn't buy something not as powerful.
No. So again, that was like kind of right before the recession. So I think he was kind of being more responsible after that for a little bit. But no Porsches after that. I don't remember. I think there was like not a fun car in our household after that for a while. Except for like the daily car that I got to share with him when I got my license, which was a Mini Cooper S. The agreement was I could drive it to high school, my senior year if I dropped him off at the train station because he commuted to New York City, and it was a great trade off because that was a really fun car and a great like first car for a car enthusiast because you can have tons of fun, and it was a manual, and you're not really going to get yourself into too much trouble in that car, but you can still have tons of fun.
Yeah, they're fun cars, aren't they? They're little go-karts, basically. Especially in the manual, they're even better. And the S, you got the Cooper S as well, so it's even better.
Yep, yeah, it was a ton of fun.
So you've had that experience of your dad owning the 930 Turbo. You've got a Mini Cooper S, which your dad let you drive to school. What happens? What happens next in your car journey? What's another memorable car that you've owned before you got into your first Porsche?
So the car that I had, before my first Porsche was a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and I was living in Los Angeles at the time. When I had that car for most of its life. I had it since college, so before I was living in LA. But most of that car's life was living in Los Angeles and off-roading it in the desert and taking it on ski trips and just beating the living hell out of it. And couldn't really at the time, because I was right out of college, couldn't afford to get anything more exciting or nicer. I ended up having to move back to New York for work for a bit and got rid of it, and was carless for, I guess a period of like 2 or 3 years. And then the opportunity came for me to move back to Los Angeles. And, I kind of knew at that point, I was like, I want a 911, or a Porsche, like that's the car that I want, and I have to make that happen because nothing else will scratch that itch or really satisfy.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking for months and months and months, and looking for like the cheapest Boxster, the cheapest 996, the cheapest Cayenne, just anything that I can afford, and looking for months at this point. And the first car that I ended up test driving was it was an 04 or an 03 Boxster S.
Okay.
And ton of fun. When it was a private sale, saw the car. It was in like okay condition, silver over black. But I got in it and could tell it wasn't really sorted. Like the clutch it didn't feel right. The steering needed, an alignment, and could just tell that, the guy was not a Porsche guy. He just bought it because his friend was selling it, didn't take care of it, was just not well sorted, but still a ton of fun. Like the exhaust in the Boxster S's, just sound awesome in those 986 cars. So test drove that, wasn't for me. And 996s at that point were like, I don't know, 15-ish. It was like, at the bottom of the market. And that was kind of more than I wanted to spend. I was like, you know what? If I get a 996 or I get a Boxster, like it's, I can't take it on ski trips. I can't take it, off-roading like, I like to do then. And I was like, why don't I look for a Cayenne? They're so cheap. Like maybe they're more reliable than, one would think. And, knowing about the Trans-Siberia cars, I was like, maybe they're really awesome and can kind of be perfect for me. And, at the time, I think you could get like a base, first gen Cayenne for like seriously like $2,000 or $3,000 US, like,
which is crazy.
They were like free. I mean, like, yeah, dealers were like buying them up and, using them as like their workhorses and then just like trashing them.
Yeah. And I think you've been pretty sensible because like you said, you had the Jeep, you had the Cherokee,
right?
And you drove it to death, right? You enjoyed it. You're outdoors, you're doing stuff. So when you look at Boxsters and you look at 911s, it is limited, right? It's limited for your lifestyle, and you really do want to get a car that fits your lifestyle. And you can get other Porsches that fit your lifestyle, and there's nothing wrong with the Cayenne. And you and I were just talking before we come online about this whole trend that's just exploding. It really is exploding, this overland and off-roading trend. So at the time, when were you looking for the Cayenne? What year was that? How long ago?
So this was like 2018, like early mid 2018. And it wasn't even like just looking for a Cayenne. It's like either 996 Boxster or Cayenne, kind of whichever one of those cars found me first, like whichever car was right and ended up finding me, that's the one I was going to buy.
Right.
And the Boxster didn't work out. 996s were more than I wanted to spend. And I was like, all right, Cayennes. So I test drove one. It was like 2 hours outside of LA in like the desert, and it wasn't sorted. The guy wanted too much for it. It had like 100,000 miles. He was asking like 17,000 for it. That's
wow. Okay.
No, it was a turbo. And one of the things that test drive told me though was like, wow, the Cayenne Turbo is awesome. It's got heaps of power. It sounds amazing. The air suspension is a cool party trick. And could be good for off-roading, or so I thought. We'll get to that. So I was like sold on the Cayenne. I found another one closer to Los Angeles. It was like a used car lot, and the guy had mostly like 10-year-old Camrys and like Honda Accords, and just had this one 04 Cayenne Turbo with 157,000 miles.
Wow.
But it looked it looked in immaculate condition. The paint was immaculate. The interior, I swear to you, it looked like it was right out of a lease. Like it had 40,000 miles on it. The headliner was not sagging, and it looked like there was nothing wrong. And I drove. Or sorry, go ahead.
Let me just ask you though, with how do you go about buying this Cayenne? Because you're talking about 2018, right? And
sure,
there's a lot. Cayennes have a lot of known problems, and I don't know what they all are, Josh. You know what I mean? The 955 is it? The 955 and the 957 is it? Is that the numbers? I can't even remember the numbers. But they have a lot of issues with them. Were you aware of those issues when you were looking for the Cayenne, or you found out about these issues once you bought it? Things that needed to be looked at, things that needed to be fixed.
I scoured the forums and read about every issue under the sun.
Okay.
And none of it really scared me. I mean, and maybe I'm wrong, and I don't know all of the issues, and there's more than I'm aware of, and I might be leading your listeners astray. But as far as I know, in the 04 Cayenne Turbo, like the 955 Cayenne Turbo, the coolant pipes because they're plastic and needed to be replaced. Which the car that I bought had that done already. The cardan shaft, which my car either didn't need or it had it replaced. I don't remember. Right. And it was like a couple other little things. And you might notice that I'm specifically leaving out the mention of air suspension.
Yes.
Again,
we'll get into that. We'll get into that. So you see this car, it's at the dealer in Los Angeles, right? It's a dealer that has other cars. Maybe he doesn't know the true value of it. It's sitting on the lot. Exactly. It looks really good. What do you do next?
So I call the guy and I'm like, what's wrong with it? What do you know about it? I ask him all the questions and I'm kind of, sussing him out. And I realize it's like, okay, he doesn't sell Porsches. He doesn't sell BMWs. Like it's just a used car lot. Someone traded it in and, he got it. Let me go see it. I see it. I drive it. And I told him, I was like, I want to do a PPI in this car tomorrow. There is the day after I drove, I was like, I want to do it tomorrow. There's a independent Porsche mechanic like 10 minutes away, a good one, who I found, and he dropped it off there. They, did a full PPI, went through it, and, it was like a couple of little things, that, anytime I buy a used car, like I expect I'm going to have to do some work, like, $3,000 to $5,000, give or take. Yeah. Because someone's selling the car, chances are they're not doing all the work that it needs if they're selling it. So it was like that kind of stuff. It was like spark plugs, like little things, and because it's a Porsche, it ended up being like, I don't know, $3,000 to $4,000 for that service. So PPI came back pretty clean. The mechanic was like, how much does the guy want for the car? And I told him, it's listed for $7,500, but I'm hoping to steal it for like $5,000. And he was like, dude, if you get that car for $5,000, like if he will sell you that car for $5,000, you should absolutely buy it. Like, doesn't matter the mileage. Like, you'll put some money into it if you need to, but it'll be a great car for you. It's like, okay. So call the guy back and, we go back and forth on a price and we agreed. I think it was like $6,300. I couldn't get him down to a 5 in front of it, which I know you're shaking your head.
Which is a Cayenne Turbo. You know what I mean?
I know.
Even an 04 Cayenne Turbo. I mean, I couldn't tell you the price off the top of my head, but there's surely not that price in the street. I can tell you that now, even for an 04. No. And you've got the top of the range. You've got the great engine, plenty of torque, plenty of power. The choice of a lot of people, I've noticed on the forums that I've been reading, a choice of a lot of people for the off-roading with, it's either the turbo or the diesel, but the diesel wasn't always readily available in the US, was it? But it's always the turbo and the diesel that people seem to want to pick for their off-roading type. Okay, so what happened with the PPI? Nothing. So with the the air suspension, we always talk about air suspension with Porsche, and I always joke about it with Range Rovers as well. But the air suspension was the checks they could do before you purchased it. Everything was fine, right?
Yeah. Okay. And let's talk about this because as far as I know, before I bought my Cayenne, when I had it, and even afterwards, everyone I've spoken to, every single person, the Porsche dealers, the independent Porsche mechanics, the Cayenne freaks, like everyone who knows these cars. Yeah. I asked them, and they all said the air suspension is not something you have to worry about. I've never even heard of air suspension going out on one of the early Cayennes. Like it is one of the only mid-2000s cars, that has air suspension that doesn't fail. And I was like, okay, deal. Like let's play with the air suspension. And I had that car, and I ended up putting all-terrain tires on it, the same size and tires that Joey Seeley uses on his cars, because I had the 18-inch wheels, and I kind of was beating the hell out of the car, and it just took everything I threw at it. It just took in stride. We would go on ski trips and go off-roading in the snow, and it was amazing. We would go in the desert, like desert running. It was amazing. And then,
let me just stop you for a second before we get into that. So how was it compared to your Cherokee? Because you had the Jeep and you enjoyed the Jeep. And like you said, you've changed the wheels. You put 18-inch wheels. So you would have put, what size wheels did you put? Really cool tires on it, did you? What are the tires? Are they the Nitto ones? Are they the Falcon ones? Which sort of tires did you put on it?
So on the Cayenne, I had the Falcon. I think it's like the AT3Ws or whatever. Yeah. And they were really good. I love those tires. They weren't noisy, and I mean seriously, like I put that car and those tires through the paces, and they did really well. I was never scared driving in snow.
Was it more fun than the Jeep?
Oh my God, yeah. So the Jeep that I have is a 6-cylinder, and anyone who's listening, yeah, you're already laughing. So anyone who knows, like the 2000 era Jeep Grand Cherokees.
Yes.
Oh my God, that 6-cylinder engine is just a dog. It is so slow.
Yeah.
And the Cayenne was quite the opposite.
Okay, so this is your first Porsche. You know what I mean? You had memories of the turbo with your dad. Was it the right way to go when you buying this Cayenne? Was it the right way to go for your first Porsche? Did you have regrets that you should have got a Boxster or you should have got a 996, or you were happy with it?
While I owned it, I was super happy with it, and even after I owned it, like even today, like it was probably one of the best cars I've ever had. It was so much fun, and super luxurious on the inside. Like even those old interiors today, they kind of hold up better than I think most people would assume. Just really comfortable and an awesome car.
I like how it looks too.
I do too. People hate on the first gen, the first gen one, but I really like it, especially the turbo with those big grills.
Yeah.
I happen to really like them, but I kind of like everything that Porsche designs for the most part. So
okay, so you've left the stock wheels on, right? You've added different tires. Did you do any other mods to the Cayenne before you took it sort of on your adventures off road? Anything else you did to it?
The only thing I did was put one of those Redline magnetic phone mounts in it.
Okay,
that was it. I wanted to take off the exhaust and just straight pipe it, like that suitcase exhaust that sits on the rear of the car.
Yeah.
But I never got around to it, and it certainly was loud enough.
All right, so you're going on adventures. You're going off road. What happened to the Cayenne? Tell the listeners what actually happened.
So 4th of July, 2020, right? Yeah, 2020. It's my girlfriend and I and our dog that we have had for like a month and a half at this point. And we are up in like Mammoth, California, which, for people who don't know, that's like in Eastern Sierra. So, in the desert, but also like very much in the mountains. And we're driving out into the desert to go to this hot spring that, we go to been to a million times before. And it's not like intense off-roading, like a super Outback could make it. Like I've seen, regular sedans make it out there. And, I'm having fun, in the Cayenne, driving a little, having a spirited drive in the desert, not doing anything, I shouldn't be. And we're like about to pull up to the hot spring, and all of a sudden the front end of the car starts sinking, and I hear,
okay.
And I'm like, oh no. And we're like now we're in the middle of the desert, probably 3 miles from the highway. And I get out of my car and I look, and I'll see if I can find a photo of it. And the front of the car is literally slammed to the ground, like no gap between the wheels and the front fenders. And I just like looked at my girlfriend. And I was like, crap, we're gonna have to figure out not only how to get out of this desert, but then to get home about 5 hours on the highway. And the amazing thing is that we were able to drive out of the desert with the front end, slammed to the ground. And
right.
I don't even think I scraped up the front bumper of the car.
Is there, sorry, Josh, is there something in the, we'll talk about the Porsche manual if anyone reads manuals anymore, but is there something, if the air suspension fails, is there anything you can do with the settings inside the car so you can drive it and get it back safely, or there's just nothing you can do? You just have to.
So I think it depends on what fails. What happened to me was, like the on-road equivalent of what happens. Like I hit a pothole way too hard.
Right.
That's essentially what happened. So the impact of hitting that pothole off-road essentially popped the airbag in the front suspension, because it literally has an airbag. Right. And that bag just popped. So there's no fixing it at that point. You need a new airbag. Which, let this be the cautionary tale for listeners who, think that a cheap Porsche Cayenne is a great off-road vehicle. I was getting quotes from my independent mechanic at the time, to replace the air suspension with Porsche parts. And he was like, oh man, the parts, $8,000. Like really? That's before I even get started. And I was like, okay, that's not worth it.
So no, that's not worth it at all, depending on the cost of the car. But Is
Right.
there an alternative though? If the I don't know if you know the answer to this, but if the air suspension goes on a Cayenne, can you say switch it out with KWs or some other suspension brand and just not have the Porsche air suspension? Is that possible or not really?
Yep, totally. So there's three options that I know of because I researched them exhaustive. I exhausted all the research that I could do. So you can either replace it with the OEM Porsche suspension. There is a company that makes air suspension replacements for these cars. I forget the name of them, but they make them for like Land Rover and the Q7s and that kind of thing. And they're like half the price of the Porsche parts. But at that point, it's like you're just going to have a lesser air suspension on your car, and if your goal is to off-road it, then that's not a good solution in my opinion. And then there's plenty of coilover conversions that I think people can do. The one that I was looking at, again at the time, this is summer 2020. I was looking at, there was this guy out of Atlanta. I know his Instagram handle. It's called Bryson the Painter.
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually just followed him today. Actually, I just followed him because he's got a good selection of Porsches on his Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah. So he, I think he's like the paint guy for Lee Keen's like Safari 911s.
Oh,
and he makes like these Safari Cayennes and does suspension conversions. So somehow I found him and was like about to order the parts from him, and then again, this is 2020, everything's being shaken up, and we had decided that we were going to leave Los Angeles, and my girlfriend had a leased car, so obviously it made sense for me to sell the Cayenne. And we were driving cross country to New York, so we didn't want two cars, and it was a sad day that I got rid of that Cayenne because I didn't even get her back to sitting straight.
So in the desert, when you're trying to get out of the desert, so the car is on an angle, is it? The Cayenne's on an angle. It's just dropped at the front, and the rear suspension's fine. It's just the front suspension is gone.
Correct. So you look at the rearview mirror and you're looking at the sky.
But you could still drive it without any rubbing or without the tires like getting mangled on the way back to recovery. Yeah,
you couldn't. I wasn't able to lock the wheel all the way, but you could turn enough. And so what happened that day is we drove back to the highway. I tried to find, this was such a futile effort, but I tried to find any mechanic, near Mammoth, California that would even know what I was talking about, and no one did, So we made the decision to drive like 4 out of the 5 hours back to Los Angeles, like to get within like the tow range of AAA, and then just towed it from there. Because the drive, that first 4 hours is just like, again, in the desert, kind of in the middle of nowhere, not a big deal if you're driving kind of a wonky car. But then the last hour being, on the 405 and like on a major highway. So I was like, I don't want to deal with that. So we towed it from there.
Okay, so you've got your Cayenne. You say you're moving out of LA. It's broken. You don't want to fix it. How do you go about selling it? Is it easy to sell? Are there plenty of people with their hands up wanting you to give you no money for it to take it off your hands?
It was actually way easier to sell than I had ever thought. So I had it on Craigslist. No, okay. What happened was there was a guy literally walking down the street in Hermosa Beach in LA where we lived, and our neighbor was like putting stuff out by the street because they were moving, and like just giving away like free potted planters or whatever. And I guess he like noticed my car and was like, hey, like that's a nice car, like I want to talk to you about it. And we started talking about it, and he has like a used car lot a half a mile down the road from our house. And he literally ended up coming back 2 hours later with cash and gave me like, I think it was like, he paid me like $3,000 cash for it, which I was kind of surprised because, it was missing the front airbags or had broken front airbags in the air suspension. But yeah, he handed me $3,000 cash and drove it off like that day. It was like such a, crazy thing that I never would have expected to happen. I didn't even have to put it on Craigslist. This guy just showed up and was like, hey, I want to buy your car for $3,000. It's broken.
And sometimes that's the best way, isn't it? I mean, it's easy. It's easy. You got half your money back. The car's broken. You knew didn't want to pay for the money to get it fixed. So, in the end, it's probably the best move anyway. So does that tarnish your, having this as your first Porsche, you've got air suspension failed. does that make you then think, hey, I'm going to keep away from Porsches for a while, or do you look for another one?
No, not at all. So, even though that happened, I still love the Cayennes and, would totally buy another turbo, just, with the caveat that you need $5,000 to do a coilover conversion, budgeted. But no, still love the Cayennes. They're great cars, and still knew that in the back of my mind, I always wanted a 911. And actually, I should also give this kind of bit of context. Back in like 2015 or 2016, when I had first moved to LA, I kind of like set the goal for myself. I was like, by my 30th birthday, I want to own a 911. Like that was the goal. And so, we were living in LA. We moved out. I sold the Cayenne. And we spent the winter in Park City, Utah, just like COVID winter. And I guess more context for the listeners. I work in film production. So in November of 2020, all film production in Los Angeles and pretty much nationwide in the States shut down. So I was like, not going to work. Let's move to, Utah for the winter, spend the winter there and, see what happens in the spring.
But Josh, that's a perfect environment for a Cayenne. You probably wish you still had it.
I know. I did, but again, the reason why I didn't keep it was my girlfriend still had like a year left on her lease, right. And we just didn't need two cars because we were going to be traveling, and it didn't make sense. I was like, you know what, the last thing we need on a cross country road trip is a Cayenne with 167,000 miles at that point.
True. Yep.
That you're going to be broken down in Kansas, and there's not going to be someone who can fix it.
Yeah,
I didn't want to deal with that.
Okay, so what happens next? So you're using your girlfriend's car. You're in Utah. When does the next Porsche start coming into your mind? When do you start searching for something else?
So this was, last spring of 21. We had figured out that we're going to be moving to Seattle. I got a job there. And, pretty much immediately, like when I knew that I was, going to be working full time and not freelance, I was like, okay, like it's 9/11 time. This is happening. Prepared my girlfriend for that fact and, started to look for cars. And, this is probably April of 21. And, was specifically looking for a 996 because, it was the only one that I could really afford. And looked at 3 cars before I got mine. And I can kind of go through details about each one.
Yep.
The first car was at Porsche of San Diego. It was a white 99 Carrera 4 with tan interior and had like 55,000 miles on it. And this was like, at the time when 996 prices like were just about to pop. Like, so you could still regularly find them for like 20. And they were asking like 33 for this car. Wow. And I thought that was quite a bit. And it did have low mileage. It was in great condition. It was white, which I think is a really special color. There weren't a lot of 996s in that color. And I think it looks really good in white.
Why is that though? I always wonder that, and we've had that conversation before on the podcast. The white 996 Carrera, there really are very, very few white 996 Carreras, no matter where in the world. It's very strange. It's very, very strange that no one spec'd it in white. And it's interesting what you said. You said that was a Carrera 4 that you saw. Carrera 4s used to be a little bit cheaper as well because people were still staying away. They were staying away from the 996, but they're also staying away from Carrera 4s because they wanted Carrera 4S more than the Carrera 4, right?
Yeah, and so it's funny that you're saying this. This was kind of my pitch to the dealer. I was like, listen, man, like this is a really of all of the undesirable 911s, like this is like the most undesirable one. Like it's white, it's got tan interior, it's Carrera 4. Nobody wants this car. Nobody wants this car. Like you want $33,000 for it, like you're crazy. And I made him a couple of offers, or let me backtrack. I wanted to do a PPI in the car. So I find this amazing Porsche mechanic, independent Porsche mechanic in San Diego. Right. The kind of guy that charges like $500 for a PPI, and they like take the oil sample out. They cut the filter. They take the oil filter out. They cut the filter. They take magnets to it. They send the oil to a lab to test it for magnetism for like the IMS, like the whole 9 yards. Like they were doing everything you could ever imagine, and you're paying for it. And the PPI comes back and I kind of forget like what it was. I think it was like spark plugs and like, you know, the little things you have to do when you buy a used car.
Yes.
You know, the other couple little things that they said that, you know, I had to do were because the car had just sat and hadn't been driven. It only had, you know, 50,000 miles on it. So it was like all of like the rubber bushings and plastic things and all of that kind of stuff needed to be replaced. And they drew up a bill or an estimate of like what it would cost. And you know, they said to do everything, it would be like $7,000 to do, you know, just what I would do to get the car started. And you could do the rest like in 12 months or whatever.
Right.
It would be like $5,000. So I went to the dealer and I literally showed them the PPI and I was like, listen, like, I know, you know, you think it's kind of a unique car and it's low mileage and this and that, but like the reality is you want $33,000 for this car and whoever buys it has to put another, you know, $7,000 into it in the first 12 months. Like,
Yes.
That's a lot of money for a 996. Like, how much do you really want for the thing? And the annoying thing to me was, you know, prior to doing the PPI, you know, I had like walked from the car because the guy said, we want asking price, you know, we want 33 for it. And that's what we expect to get. I was like, you don't have any room? He was like 32.5. And I was like, okay, it's not the car for me. Like, see you later. He then like the salesperson at the dealership texts me back and he was like, hey, like if you want to do a PPI in the car, and, you know, some things come back that, you know, we have to do either like we'll do them ourselves because, you know, they were a Porsche dealership or
Right.
like we can find some room in the price. I was like, okay, great. I'd like to do the PPI then. I do the PPI, comes back needing $5,000 to $7,000 worth of work. And the guy's like, okay, we want 33 for the car. And I was like, you've got to be kidding. And I was not very cordial or nice to him.
Yeah.
Because I was like, you just cost me $550 and told me that, you know, you would kind of negotiate accordingly. I'm not looking to steal the car for $15,000, but like, let's be reasonable here. And had some words with the guy.
Yeah. At least meet you halfway. At least
well,
At least take $3,000 off or something like that. Yeah. That's pretty bad, actually. That's not good.
And it was really kind of messed up, man. And like, I told him, I was like, listen, like you said, meet me halfway. Like, do some of the work yourselves. Like, do the motor mounts. And they're like, no, we won't do any work to the cars. Like, you're a Porsche dealer. Like, don't you have those sitting around? Like, it's come on. So I walked from that car, had some words with the guy because you know that left a really bad taste in my mouth. They sold the car literally the next day for full ask. Like someone
Really?
walked in, because I called the guy. I was like, hey, like, do you still have it? Just curious. Like, I'm not going to buy the car from you. I'm just curious. And he was like, actually, we sold the car like the day after we spoke. Guy came in, paid full ask, no PPI.
I guess they just know there's going to be people out there that will go in and not do a PPI. That will just, you know, go with their heart, let their emotions take over and just buy the car without checking it. But like you said, they should have let you know at the start that they weren't going to negotiate on the price if you're going to put in $500 to do a PPI. I mean, I think that's a bit wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, like I had already walked from the car at that point. You know, that's what annoyed me. I was like, okay, like it's not for me. And they're like, okay. And then anyway, that was not a great experience. And you know, I guess another cautionary tale for your listeners.
Okay, so that one didn't work out. What's the next one that comes along?
Okay, so the next one, and again, at this point, we're still in Park City, Utah, like moving to Seattle, like in 30 days from like this point of when I'm looking at the next one.
Yeah.
So the next one is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and guy wanted like $27,000 for it. It was silver over black, Carrera 2, just totally base and basic.
Right.
You know, point one, I wasn't really looking at the point twos, and it's like cool. The price is pretty right. Like maybe they can negotiate a little bit. And, you know, I made sure to ask him, I was like, hey, I want to do PPI in the car. Depending on what comes back, like, are you willing, do you have some room? And he said, yeah, of course. Cool. And I gave him the whole sob story of like the last dealer that I spoke to. And he was like,
on his word. Yeah.
Right. And he was like, oh, like, that's not right. We would never do that, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, honestly, like, I want to speak to your sales manager, like, just to make sure, because, and I'm not trying to be a dick. I just want to make sure that like, I'm going to do this PPI and spend now this one was $300 that, you know, if it comes back and needs some work that, you know, you're going to negotiate with me.
Yes.
And he said, yeah, of course. Don't worry about it. Cool. So I find this mechanic, and, you know, they do the whole PPI and the last thing that they do is check the oil filter.
Right.
And, you know, I called the guy in the middle of like the day when he was looking at the car and he was like, almost like ecstatic. He was like, oh, everything's going really well. Like there's nothing wrong. Like this is such a great car, blah, blah, blah. It's like, cool. Like and did you do the oil filter yet? And he was like, no, that's last. I was like, okay. So that's the last thing he does, like at the end of the day, he calls me and he's just like, not good. Like, okay. What's going on? And he's like, there is more metal in this filter than I have ever seen in any 996 filter. Like, please do not buy this car. And honestly, you should tell the dealer because, and look, I don't know how these IMS bearings work. Maybe you can get another 50,000 miles out of the car. Maybe the dealer, goes to move the car and the thing explodes. Who knows?
Right.
So, at that point I was like, well, this is not the one.
So what did the dealer say, Josh, when you told him that? Did he believe you?
So, I called the dealer and I was like, hey man, like I got some bad news for you. How much are you into the car for? I'm not buying it. How much are you into the car for? And he was like, well, I can't really tell you. I was like, that's fine. You should really replace the IMS bearing because it's like gonna fail. And I showed him the photos and like sent him the PPI,
right.
Just because like I thought I was doing the right thing. Like I don't want someone to get screwed with this car. Yeah. And he was just like, sighed like, oh, that sucks. And I think he said he was gonna replace the bearing and then try and sell it.
But it's still got issues anyway, though, right? So it's still not, you wouldn't buy that car. You wouldn't buy that 911.
I personally wouldn't, but
I would.
Maybe someone will and enjoy it, but yeah. So that was the second one.
So number 2, third time lucky.
Okay, the third one. At this point, we had moved to Seattle. This is like a month later, and I find this car in Portland, Oregon, 3 hours south of us. Great,
nice and close.
Nice and close. I think it was black over black, no Aerokit, just Carrera 2, had like 70,000 miles. It was like perfect. Doesn't have so few miles where I got to worry about things or worry about the value or whatever. And still enough where, there's room. It's not like it doesn't have 150,000 miles. And it's black, basic. Okay, cool. And speaking to the dealer, and I think at this point I was so frustrated by, not getting cars or, cars not working out that like, I was like, not even going to do PPI on this one. I told my girlfriend, I was like, and she knew of like the IMS PPI, like the whole like risk that I was, getting into with buying this car. So I think I told her at that point, I was like, I'm just going to go down to Portland tomorrow and buy this car if it's still there. I'm going to fly down there, like whatever. And I'm like talking to the salesperson. I was like, hey man, like I'm going to come down tomorrow, give you full ask. Or I think they were asking like 26 and I was prepared to give them like 25 or whatever. Right. And he was like, cool, like, let's do it. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm like looking at flights and I get a call from the guy and he said, hey, someone just came in and bought the car full ask. And
wow.
I was like, oh, no, not again. So this is the third one.
But this is just go back to your the cost and how you sort of justify costs. You've done two PPIs.
Yeah.
And you made the choice on this third one because you've already, wasted $800 or whatever it is, $700, $800. Yep. You think the next one you're not going to do the PPI. But in reality though, Josh, like you could have lost a hell of a lot more money if you would have bought the other two. You know what I mean? So it's still, I know it's dead money and it's lost money, but it still saves you more in the long run. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. And I wasn't looking to forego the PPI on the third one because I was looking to save, $300. I was just like, let's just do this. I don't even want to do PPI anymore. Like, I just want the car. Like, it's available. It's in my backyard. Like, let's do this.
Yep.
And that didn't happen.
And these cars go quickly. We all know that. People buy them from underneath you. So, okay. So, what happens next?
So, and again, this was June of 2021, like the height of when, at least in the States, the 996 market was going like crazy. Like,
yes.
Tons of cars being auctioned and they're all just going, the values are going nuts. So at that point, I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to get a 996. Like, this isn't the right time. Let me just go lease a Tesla Model 3 or get a Tesla Model 3, like something more sensible. Like, let's just give up on it. And for like 2 or 3 weeks, I'm looking at like the Alpha Giulia, I'm looking at the Tesla, like whatever, looking for something that's like still going to be fun, but more practical. And I just completely stopped looking for a 996. And one day I'm just like, all right, let me just take a look at cars.com, and I'm looking and I see this car. It's in Culver City, which is, Los Angeles.
Right.
But the photos of the car do not look like it was in Culver City. It looked like it was in the forest. And there were 5 photos. They were really terrible photos, blurry. And I just see this blue Aerokit car with 1 interior photo. It was literally 5 photos. Okay. this is probably a scam because, the car is 70,000 miles. It's listed on a number of different car websites.
Right.
And it was listed for like 20 grand. I was like, that is way low for, what 996s are going for right now, especially because it's a special color and Aerokit car. And I had seen, Craigslist ads for like a guards red over tan Aerokit car with 40,000 miles, and they only want 20 grand for it. And it's a scam, obviously. Right. So that's what I thought. Like, this is a scam. It's not real. Don't even pay it any mind. I didn't even like reach out to the guy. So a couple days go by, and I'm looking again, just, for fun. And I see the same car get posted for sale, same mileage, the same price, same everything, but now it's listed in Idaho. And I was like, oh, okay, it's definitely a scam. Like, this is exactly what these scammers do. They list it in one location, they get someone, they go to another, and like, it's got to be a scam. So I forget about it. A couple days go by. Greg, a First Flat 6, posted about this car. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, if Greg is posting about this car, it must be real, because I don't think he would. I think he would probably do his due diligence, and it's within his best interest to not post a scam. So it's got to be real. It's like, all right, I'm gonna reach out to this guy and see if it's real. And I email the guy, and he's kind of being like, I don't really have a word to describe it other than just like kind of weird. He was just like strange.
Right.
And like wasn't being very responsive. And I asked him if I could do a PPI. He said sure, and then never got back to me. And like we're going back and forth like 2 weeks, and he's like not really getting back to me. And it ends up being like 2 weeks later, and I just emailed him. I was like, hey, like there's a local mechanic in like right across the border in Washington, from like 30 minutes from where he is in Idaho, who will do a PPI. They have availability tomorrow. Which I had to like sweet talk them into, because, this like one Porsche mechanic in Eastern Washington was booked out. Like they were literally booked out 3 months, and they were like, oh, we're not doing PPIs until, October. And I was like, dude, I can't ask this guy to wait until October to do PPI. So
why was he not being responsive? He just didn't really want to sell the car, or he just didn't have the time? What was it? I
don't know. He just like wasn't being responsive, and I was just getting a weird vibe from him. Something was just kind of off. And so I sent him like a last ditch email. I was like, hey, these guys can do a PPI on the car tomorrow. Can you bring it to them? Never heard back. The next day, I get a call from the mechanic. Hey, he just brought the car, and you still want us to do the PPI? Like, guy never confirmed that he was going to bring it in to me. Like, I had no idea. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's do the PPI. So they do it. They go through everything. And the guy calls me back, and he's like, there's no oil, or there's no metal in the filter. It needs an alignment.
Okay.
And like,
have you seen any more photos since then? Or it's just the dodgy photos that he had up on, nothing else? Okay.
No. And so the next thing I was going to say is the mechanic said, there's really nothing that wrong with it. Like it's going to need a couple of things like here and there, the typical 996 fare, but the color. He was like, the color, I've never seen this color before on any Porsche. It's like one of the most beautiful colors I've ever seen. Like you have to come see it. And the paint's in really good condition. And it's ocean blue metallic over gray interior with an Aerokit. And, I didn't ask for more photos at that point. I just told him, can I speak to the seller? And I spoke to the seller. I said, hey, man, I'm coming tomorrow. I'm paying you full ask. Can you pick me up at Spokane Airport at 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning, whatever. I'm getting the first flight out. Like, I didn't want to give him a chance to like think about it, like whether he was not going to sell it or sell it to someone else. I was like, I'm showing up here literally first thing tomorrow. Can you pick me up and take me to a bank, and I will give you a cashier's check? And he said, yeah, of course. And I went home, booked a flight, and flew out the next morning.
So you get off the plane, you see the car for the first time. How was it? As good as what you expected?
So this is kind of funny and speaks to like how weird this guy was. I like texted him that I landed, and I get an email from him, and like that's kind of like what I mean. He's like weird, like I have his number, but he's still emailing me. So he emails me, the Eagle has landed, to inform me that he got to the airport. I'm just like, oh, this dude's right. Okay. And nothing wrong with that. Just kind of
sense of humor.
So exactly. So I walk out of the airport, and I see the car waiting, and he's got the front open, and he's got the rear deck lid open. And I just thought that was kind of funny. So I walk over to the car, and it was kind of like a cloudy morning. So, if you've ever seen, a Porsche in this color, when it's cloudy or like kind of flat, even light, it looks kind of just like a regular dark ocean, kind of ocean indigo blue almost.
Yes.
But then when you have like the early morning or like late afternoon, like really harsh, intense light, it looks like purple. And, you get every variation of blue between like that purple and really deep blue. So when I first saw the car, it was, kind of like a uniform color. And I was like, what was this guy talking about? Like, it's a beautiful color, but like, I didn't really, get what he meant by like, this is a really special color and a special kind of paint job. And, so the seller and I.
So you see it, you don't have any second thoughts. Obviously you didn't have any second thoughts because you bought it. Like you said, the color is fantastic. Ocean blue metallic is a really nice color. You don't see that many of them. It's quite a rare color. So the Aerokit that came on your car, was it a 996? Was it the GT3 Aerokit, or was it a Aerokit 2, which has got the slightly different wing?
No, so it's the 996.1 GT3 Aerokit.
Nice.
And like the taco shell. The only thing it doesn't have, like sometimes on like the rear bumper, there are like those little fins.
Yes.
On some of the early Aerokit cars, which mine doesn't have, which I'm actually happy about because personally I don't love them. And to me, they just look like they have weight.
Yeah. But is it a full Aerokit, Josh? Has it got the front as well? It's full Aerokit, right? Not just the rear. Full Aerokit. Yep. So it's got the side as well.
The side, and the rear taco spoiler.
Nice. And what wheels did it come with? Because I haven't seen a picture of your car, I don't think I saw it on your Instagram. Is there a picture on your car? I don't remember seeing it. Has it got
I don't think so.
What wheels does it have?
I'll send you some. So it's got turbo twists, and they're actually in really good condition too. So I have to recondition them, which I love the look because it looks like the 0.1 GT3, essentially. And I mean, like the narrow body 996.1 with an Aerokit car, like I know 996s are like Porsche files don't really like them. I have a different opinion, and I think the 0.1s with the Aerokit cars, to me, I really think is one of the most beautiful 911s ever made. And one of the things that I wanted to mention today is every 911 that was designed before the 996 was modeled completely by hand and designed by hand. Every 911 that was made after the 996 was, I don't think it was clay modeled by hand. Maybe it was, but I know that the 997 and every car that came after that was designed solely by computer.
Right.
The 996 was designed by hand and computer. And for me, like there's something about like the lines on the 996 that are just so special because like they almost look like liquid. Like every car that came before a little bit is a little more rigid, and every car that came after, again, to me, like it looks like, and this is not me hating on the 997 because they're all beautiful cars, but there's a little more life in like the 996 design to me, like those lines.
I agree. I think it's very weird now when we look back at it because the hate that the 996 had, the headlights and just other parts of the 996 and the interior. And I had this conversation with someone yesterday, that I'd never, my wife's boss, had a Carrera 4. And not once in all the times I went in that car did I think the interior was below par. Always when I sat in that car, I thought the interior was just fantastic. You know what I mean? And the headlight thing, I guess, for me, the deeper I got into Porsche is like the more you sort of started seeing these comments about people hating on the headlights. But I never thought they were that bad. Does yours have the amber front lights or does it still have the clear? No, it doesn't. Has the clear.
It's clear, and I don't have like the xenons, which I like when the lights are off. I like the look of the xenons better because they look more modern. But when the lights are on, I like the more yellow orangish glow. It just looks more classic to me.
Yeah, I think that's the main issue that I have with my car because I've got the 997.1, as you know, right? Carrera, base Carrera. And I find the lights, and coming from an Audi beforehand that had xenons, I find the lights very weak, very dim. You know what I mean? Especially on a dark road of a night, it's very dim. And I did buy replacement bulbs, and I was going to put them in. I never got around to it, which you can do. You can just replace the bulbs with something brighter, something newer. So I will try those, I think, when I go back to Sydney. But I just want to go back to the Aerokit. I think you're right. I think there was a lot of hate on the Aerokits, especially on 996s and 997s. But, I think as well, now times past, I think that the Aerokit is seen now as something that was quite rare. Not everyone spec'd it out.
Yeah.
Not everyone optioned it.
Yeah.
And now, if you've got a rare color, you've got a manual, you've got an Aerokit, factory Aerokit, it makes your 996 more unique. And I think that's, especially in the color you've got, I think that's great. What were the other options it had though, Josh? Were there any other options?
I could take a picture of like the front sticker that actually has them listed. I don't think so. Like no limited slip differential.
Right.
I don't think they even made those on the 2000 cars. No, I think it's like pretty base. I don't have a rear wiper, which in Seattle, is kind of problematic. But I don't drive the car in the rain anyway. Yeah. No, I think it was like pretty bare bones aside from that. But it's the color combination in the Aerokit that for me, really does it. And I mean, the rear end of like the 996.1s with the Aerokit is, I really think my favorite rear end of any 911. It's just, it's like nice. Svelte, the narrow bodies just look so good, I think.
Okay. So maybe you mentioned it, maybe I just didn't hear it. How many miles did it have? Your car?
So I bought it with, it was like 77,900.
Okay. So it's pretty low. So you got a good deal there. You got a good price. So you do the deal with this guy, you fly there, you meet up with him. He's a little bit odd. He's got a sense of humor. You give him the cash. How do you get the car back home? Do you drive it back home or do you truck it back home?
Oh, I drove it. So, it's about a 6-hour drive from Spokane. And, you're driving through Eastern Washington in the middle of the summer, which, is a desert and very hot. And, I was a little bit concerned about, like overheating or just, I don't know, I'm driving a 20-year-old Porsche for the first time. I've never, and let me also give the context, like I had never driven.
This is your first 911 you've driven, right? Is this
So I had driven, my buddy in Los Angeles has a beautiful ice cream metallic 86 or 84, I don't know.
Right.
It's one of the G-body 911s. And I drove that in LA traffic for about 5 minutes and was kind of terrified doing so because it was also like the day he had bought the car in Canada, drove it back to LA, like got to LA like 2 days prior, and then I drove it. And so it was very new for him.
But the dream for all of us, right? You pick up your 911. I picked up my 911 and drove it, through the inner city of Sydney back to where I live. And then eventually I went on a long drive and really got to feel the car and enjoy the balance of the car and the noise of the car and just the whole experience. You pick up your car, you get to enjoy it straight away, which I think is a really cool thing to do, right? Sure, it's a bit scary. It's your first 911. But how was that feeling when you were on the open road and you're in this 996 and it's yours?
So it was like a mix between kind of being a little hesitant and scared and just being like the sweetest and just most awesome, one of the most awesome experiences. On one hand, it was kind of scary because, it was a 6-hour drive and kind of the middle of nowhere. And had anything happened, you'd be a long tow away from, a Porsche mechanic. And, not worried about my well-being in that sense, more so just like the whole ordeal of it.
But you were by yourself, Josh? Sorry, you by yourself?
Yep, by myself. Okay. And, the other thing that I knew about this car was that the rear tires were like beyond bald. They look like racing slicks.
Oh, right.
And the car needed an alignment too. So, my first drive in the car, having never driven a 996 before, I didn't really know how one was supposed to feel, especially when I sorted one and got in that car. And, I don't want to say I was disappointed. I knew that there were things that needed to get sorted out for it to drive how it was supposed to.
You couldn't push it, basically. You couldn't push it, not with tires like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And with the alignment, that needed to get done between that and the tires, I was driving not like so cautiously where I was doing 5 under, but, cautious.
All right.
But it was, it's a great drive.
It's a great, so you get back to Seattle, things have to be done. Do you do them straight away? Do you think, okay, obviously the tires you have to do straight away if you're going to drive it. Do you start, you take it to your specialist, do you take it to Porsche dealer? What do you do and what do you decide to do first? Do you just get the necessities done?
So first was tires because I really didn't want to drive it without, proper alignment or tires. So I took it to Porsche of Bellevue, like the only Porsche dealership like in the Seattle area.
Okay.
And so another interesting thing and kind of another, cautionary tale for future 996 buyers. I took the car in to get tires and then realized that I didn't have the wheel lock key for which I didn't even know what this was, having never driven or owned a sports car before. And I assume they're mostly on, sports cars. So the key for my wheel locks, Porsche stopped making, and I just had to get a new set. But that was the first thing I did. I did tires, and I'm glad I went to, Porsche Bellevue, because otherwise I would have had to go back to them anyway, because I didn't have the key. So that was the first thing I did. And then, that was like the first week I had the car. Then like the second week or third week or whatever, I took it to, kind of the best indie Porsche mechanic in Seattle. Acres. I'll plug them for any Seattle listeners that are listening. They're awesome. And they did everything. So my car, they went through the car and did everything that it needed. So I did AOS, RMS, IMS, clutch, flywheel, and I think that's it.
Yeah, so that's a pretty big bill. But you got the car at a good price, right? So that's a pretty big bill with tires as well. So you must be over $5,000 already, right? Yeah.
So the other thing I did that I forgot to mention, which was kind of an important thing, was the transmission. Now that made a big difference.
Okay.
How the car, handled and idled and just rode as well. But yeah, and so that was kind of a big bill. But I got a good, like you said, I got a car for under what I thought it was worth. And I kind of knew, and whenever I've bought a used car, I buy one with the expectation that you're going to put $3,000 to $5,000 in it. I had to do a little more than I was expecting. So it cost a little more than that. I think, with tires and everything, it was probably like $7,000 to $8,000 total.
$7,000 or $8,000.
But tires are expensive.
But you, like you said, you took it to your independent, your specialist in Seattle, and nothing else showed up, right? Everything was perfect, and now the car is sorted.
Yeah, he said that down the line I'm gonna have to do a water pump, and said that brakes. He said brakes, like I'll have to do any day, and the light still hasn't come on, and they told me like until the light comes on, you don't need to do brakes.
Yeah.
So don't do them. So I'm still just waiting for that. And I'll probably do pads and rotors when it happens. But yeah, that's eventually water pump, and I think that's kind of it.
Josh, that's when you know you've got a good independent, when they tell you. They don't tell you to change the brakes. The same as my independent in Sydney at Woodhouse Hamilton. They said the same thing. I thought I had to change it because I went to Porsche Sydney. I've said this story before. It had on their report, it said brakes had to be changed, pads and rotors, and Autohouse said don't do anything until the light comes on, and that was 4 years ago. So you know what I mean?
Right.
So that's I think that's a good sign of a good independent when they give you advice like that. That's for sure, not to change it now.
Yeah. So and go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say if it hasn't been said already on the podcast, I'm sure it has, but anyone who's owning one of these cars and is on any sort of budget, doing work at a dealer is not going to be friendly to that budget for the most part.
Yeah, true. I mean, I think a lot of people who have bought a 911, a few people on Owner Stories and other people I've spoken to on Instagram, a lot of people when they first buy it, they'll take it to a Porsche dealer, right? They'll take it there to get it on their system, to get them to check it first, and then they'll go back to their independent. Do you know what I mean? Just to get it fully checked. And I know, a friend in Sydney did the same thing just recently. And, I guess that's okay to do that. But for regular maintenance, like you said, the difference between, the service, a major service at a Porsche dealer or an independent is a lot. And it's not just the cost of the service. It's what they choose to do and what they choose not to do. And I think that's where you sometimes forget about that side of it. You know what I mean? It's not just the cost on the bill.
Yeah.
So what else, Josh? You've got your 911, 996. You've got a great one, 996.1, the sought after model at the moment. What have you got anything else planned you want to do with the car? And I always like to ask the question: has it got an exhaust mod on the car? Is the sound of it good, or do you want to play with that?
So, I mean, it sounds great just because it's a flat six engine and they just sound so good. But no, it has a stock exhaust, and that's kind of one of the that is the next thing that I'm going to do is an exhaust. I'm kind of debating what to do. Obviously Pfister is high on the list. I'm debating, I haven't heard a 996 with a Pfister, like in person, obviously, like there are YouTube videos. And I really would like to hear one in person before making that decision. But I don't know if, and this isn't a knock on Fister because, exhausts are so, it's to your personal taste.
Yes.
Being that I don't drive the car all that often, I'm not sure if Fister is going to be loud enough for what I'm hoping to achieve, I guess.
It's not that loud. No, Fister's not that loud. It's quite soft. I mean, it's enough, but it isn't it isn't GT3 loud. I mean, and a lot of people pick fab speed, don't they? I've noticed that that's a trend for the 996. A lot of people go with the fab speed exhaust, so there must be some benefits there with the fab speed. I'm guessing it's louder.
And I guess I think the last owner stories that you put out that I listened to, you were talking about the Gundo Hack and how in your experience it's been louder than any Fisters you've heard.
Yeah.
And that's kind of got me thinking that maybe I want to do that instead of a Fister. But I'm not sure yet. I kind of want to hear them in person before I make that decision because it's not a lot of money, but it's I want to make the right decision, right?
It's not super cheap now. The Fisters have gone up in price quite a bit, so they're not super cheap. I noticed the other day they're quite expensive, more expensive than I paid.
Okay.
But the Gundo, I don't know if that's true or not. I just remember reading it. I think on Renlist, that people said that Gundo is much, much louder. I think it's good to look into other options though as well. Fab speed. I don't know what about Soul Performance. I know a lot of people do Soul Performance exhausts. I find the tone of them a little bit wrong for me. I don't like the tone of the Soul Performance. But like you said, it is hard when you buy an exhaust, and this is the same problem we all go through. I went through as well. Is that YouTube, you just can't hear it properly. No one can record it properly. It doesn't sound the same. It never sounds the same, in real life. So that's the problem. You really do need to meet up with a Porsche event where someone's got it and you can actually hear it in real life for sure.
Yeah. But I think the easy, answer and kind of default answer for a lot of people is, do a Fister. That's definitely, on my
mind. And they're a good product. They are a good product.
Yeah.
Especially if you get the ceramic coating on them, that reduces some of the heat and stuff like that. Obviously that's more expensive, but I mean, I'm happy with mine. I mean, like I said, I didn't want anything too droning in the cabin. I didn't want the sound to be that bad in the cabin. You have the windows down a bit, you can hear it. It's good at idle. It's good when you take off. It's good when you're in third gear around the twisties. It actually sounds very, very good. So that's cool. I'm very happy with mine. I wouldn't, I would say if you just want something that's medium range, I think the Fister is a good one. If you want something louder, you want a more racy tone, obviously the Fister is not going to be correct.
Yeah. We'll see. I'll follow up with you and let you know.
Tell me what you end up with. So you stop looking then? That's it? You're not looking at Porsches anymore? You're happy with this one? You're not still looking? Because I know this. I'm going back to the off-road trend, and I know you're in Seattle. Are you tempted to look at those Cayennes again and see if you can get a cheap one to go alongside the 996?
So it's funny that you ask. So I'm not really driving my 996 right now because it's been raining pretty much every day for the last month and a half.
Yeah.
So I'm on summer tires, Michelin Sport, PS2s.
Okay.
And when it's 40 degrees and raining, I just don't want to drive the car. So I'm really only taking it out nowadays when it's sunny.
Yeah.
I kind of eventually need and want a car that I can daily all year round here. My girlfriend now has her lease ended. So she has a Grand Cherokee, a new one that she's leasing, which is a great car. It's not as fun as a Cayenne, but a real workhorse and will do really well for us here. Eventually when I'm ready to buy a daily car that I can drive year round here, it doesn't have to be something with high ground clearance because we have her car. Right. So I have whittled down what my daily car will be. I've whittled it down to two cars.
Right.
And the first option is another 996, but get a Carrera 4.
Okay. Carrera 4. Okay.
And the dream would be a 0.1 Carrera 4. Yep. Lift it and put all-terrain tires on it.
Okay. And Safari build.
And there's a YouTube video that I recently discovered. It was filmed like when 996s were new, and Porsche did this like desert experience where they took 996 Carrera 4s, 0.1s out. Yeah, I got to send it to you.
They put off-road tires on it, did they?
Yes. And it's
with standard rims or different rims?
It's standard rims, and I think they have like an inch lift on the car.
I'd like to see that.
I gotta send it. It's so funny because you see like the rear end of the car, the engine hanging off the back, and they're like just beating the hell out of them. And the drivers are like, oh, these cars are amazing because they're so stiff. They're so good at off-roading. And I'm just like, I was watching this video. I'm like, I don't believe what I'm seeing. Like,
I haven't seen that one. I'd like to see
the
that.
car I've always needed is.
Yeah. Did you see that 997 though? The one on Bring a Trailer that I don't know if you heard. Did you see that one that sold?
I think that guy's in Washington too.
Is he?
I think he is. But I saw that, and that's an awesome car. Like
he put a lot of money into it. I mean, I don't know if I get it. I mean, I think I'd rather get the Cayenne and do it to the Cayenne. But I mean, he definitely put a lot of parts, and it sold. It sold at a good price, didn't it? It sold at like 80,000 or something, 80,000 odd for a Carrera.
Yeah, wow.
So that's a lot.
But so since my girlfriend has the SUV, the Grand Cherokee. That I was thinking either get another 996 and just have dueling the 996s, and that would kind of be hilarious, especially if one of them was like lowered in an Aerokit and the other one was lifted and for off-roading. But the other car that I think would be a great pair for my situation and my needs that I've always loved ever since this car was new is the Audi B7 RS4. I just love that car. And,
that's a good car. And they're cheap. They're cheap now. Well, they're cheap. I don't know about in the US. In Australia, they've gone down in price quite a lot.
How much are they by you?
And I'm going to take a wild guess here. I think you can get a high mileage one for about 60,000 Australian.
Yeah. Okay. So
that's about 45,000 US, maybe?
No. So one on Cars and Bids just went for 27.5, I think, and it had cheap. Only like 80,000 miles. And I wish I had the money to do it right now because I would have been on that car.
Yeah, they're a good car. They're a really good car. I mean, I had an Audi A4 S-Line, which wasn't the the S4, and that was a great car. I had the Avant, the wagon. Awesome. And that was a great car. But I always still keep looking at, the very first generation RS4, Josh. I don't know if it was available in the US. I'm not sure if it was available to you guys. But the very, very first generation, the B5. I always look at those. They don't come up very often. There's not that many in Australia. But that's still a very iconic, very, very cool car. A car I think that will go up in value a lot. But no, that's a good choice alongside your 996, that's for sure.
I thought so, and I love that car. It's got the V8 out of the Gallardo,
super fast,
and it's super fast and all-wheel drive
good torque. Yeah,
yep, super understated styling. Like it's just it. There are cars of that
running
era.
Costs, Audis are a bit. I always say this.
I'm sure
they're a bit more expensive, I think, than Porsche, to be honest. But
I'm sure. And it's funny that I'm even saying this because my mom had. She leased like a 2006 Audi A6, when it was new. And that car was at the dealership once a week for electronic issues and just like little things. Like the windows would stop working. The rolling locks would stop working. The turn signal would stop working. Like everything on that car went wrong. And ever since, that was my parents' first and last Audi. And ever since then, I've kind of been scared of getting one. But there are a few models that, I think are great.
Mine was a B6, and honestly, things like that didn't happen. It was more maintenance things. Things that would seem to wear out quicker than they should for a car that only had 110,000 kilometers on it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that I think that's something you have to watch out for the Audis, that's for sure. Hey, Josh, we're almost at the end of the podcast. I think you've given the listeners a really good insight into 996s today, and I think you've given them a good insight into, how to find, the trials of, or the fun, I guess you call it fun, the fun of finding your first 911. You don't always, and you don't always get the first one you see, right? You do the PPIs, they don't always turn out, but eventually you will find it if you really want one. So you got your 996, you got the Aerokit. I was going to ask you actually before we get into your favorite drive, I was going to ask you, are you tempted to put the GT3 seats in your 996 because you've got the Aerokit?
I don't actually know what the 0.1 GT3 seats look like. Are they like the Sportback seats?
Yeah, the rounded race seat. I think they're not pole positions, are they? I think they're made by Recaro. The race seats, like a bucket seat, like the lightweight bucket in the GT3, the new ones, but they're, I don't know how to explain them, more rounded. Search it online, you'll see that they come up. I know some people have put them in their 996. Few people have done it. I mean, they're not cheap though. They're not cheap.
No, I'm sure it's probably $2,000 a seat, if not more. But the seats in the 996 are comfortable. I do wish there was like a little more bolstering on like the stock seats. I think if I were gonna do seats in my car, I mean, it doesn't really work with like the gray interior, but I do love.
Oh, that's right, gray.
The Pepita seats. So I don't know. I'll probably just keep the seats. The way
I think
they
so
are.
too.
the other thing that you've always asked 996 owners about is, the Porsche, the DIN unit, whatever they call it.
Yes.
CarPlay.
Yes. You're going to get the new one?
No, it's so funny. Before I bought the 996, I was like, oh, got to do it. Budgeting for it. That's great. And then I called Porsche and they were like, oh yeah, it's going to be like $4,000, even though the unit is only $1,800. I was like, no, absolutely not doing that.
The fitment cost is really expensive. A lot of people have said that.
Crazy.
Fitment, because they've got to take out the whole air conditioning vents and something as well. I don't know why it's so expensive. I wonder if you get an independent, if you can just buy, I guess they won't sell it to you separately, will they? And just get an independent to fit it. Surely it doesn't cost that much.
So I think Suncoast sells them, I'm pretty sure. But, my independent Porsche mechanic won't do that because that's like a radio thing. You have to go to like a radio shop for that. So it would just be something different. I wouldn't trust just any radio shop doing that in my car. And, I realized after, the first 2 days of having the car, I was like, I never want to listen to music in this car. I've never turned the radio on other than just to test it. And, partially because I'm I haven't driven a manual in so long, as a daily car. I kind of feel that I need to have the radio off just for, my own, abilities to drive the car smooth.
I'm the same. I like to hear, you like to hear the car, don't you? You like to hear the 911. I never have the radio on. I never put it on. I never use the navigate. Obviously, my navigation in my 997 works because I updated the maps when I first got it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I updated the maps only because I found a guy who was in in Queensland in Australia.
Right.
I think he pirated the maps. They weren't legit, but they were very cheap and they were real. They
cool,
worked
though.
and everything. So you could update it to the latest version. But bear in mind, the latest version, and I don't know whether this has changed, someone might correct me on it. The latest version when I bought my car in 2017 was 2014 or 2015. That was the latest version. And I think I checked recently and it's still the same. So they have never updated the maps. So
I'm sure.
they're not very precise, that's for sure. Josh, almost run out of time. So we always like to finish the podcast on favorite roads. You're in Seattle. You're in a good place of the world. You drove your 911 back to Seattle. What are some of your favorite roads that if someone's in the region and they want to take their car, their sports car, their 911 for a drive, what roads would you say definitely you should not miss?
Yeah. So I wish I could give you like some really awesome answers here, but since I'm still new to the area, I'm still like kind of figuring out, which is part of the fun. No, I can definitely give you some good answers. So another guy that I guess I'm gonna plug. It's this website called Dan's Drives. If you just Google it, like Dan's Drives, it'll come up. And he's like a local Washington, Seattle, Pacific Northwest kind of guy, and he puts together like these route maps for like good, enthusiast drives. So that has been kind of a nice introduction and easy way for me to, discover good drives. And he's got them by like multi-day, by single day. And,
really?
It's kind of a cool way to do it.
Fantastic.
So if you ever happen to visit, it's, it would be a good way to get some good drives. But so I have like one drive that I do when it's nice out. And I want to stay kind of local. I don't really know the name of the road. I just know the end point. It's like this hotel kind of lodge called like the Salish Lodge. Right. And you just drive there and the roads around there are just awesome back roads. And they're super fun and, twisty and, usually not too heavily trafficked and it's super fun. But, the good thing about living in Washington is there's so many mountain roads.
Yeah, I was going to say you're in the best place for it.
Yeah. So next summer I will have lots of fun exploring all of them. Like there's Hurricane Ridge, like just for the listeners, I guess, Hurricane Ridge in Olympic National Forest is supposed to be like one of the best, and that's on the list. And then there's like a loop through like North Cascades National Park, which is like all mountains, and I mean it's literally like 14 hours of like just on mountain passes through like they look like the Swiss Alps almost.
Well, next summer you can put the all-road tires on your car. Put the roof box on the roof and just go exploring.
Yeah, exactly.
So, fantastic. Josh, it's been great chatting. Thanks for coming on Owner Stories today. I always like to keep these to an hour, like I always say. We've gotten to about an hour and 20 today. That's fine. Is there anything you would like to share with the listeners before we go?
No, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. And, the thing I would say to, your listeners is, the car buying process, especially now, is like, it's always been a frustrating frustrating and kind of terrible experience, especially now with you know, the way the car market is. And just try and kind of keep that, you know, in your perspective when you're looking for a 996 or a 911, because, you know, in some ways finding the right, you know, Porsche can be a lot easier because the search is so much smaller, but in a lot of ways that makes it harder. So, you know, just be patient and let the right car find you, and drive it once you find it.
Fantastic. Josh, do you want me to share your Instagram to the listeners or not?
Well, I have one for like my car that I rarely ever use. Why don't you share that one? Because it actually has photos of my car.
Okay.
And it's Ocean Blau Aero. So I can like, it's spelled the German way. So I'll text it to you.
That's right. Text it to me and I'll put it into the description of the podcast. I'll put it in the description of the podcast. So all the listeners, go over to Josh's Instagram, give him a follow. Hopefully he'll put some more photos up before you guys get there and you can see his car. Josh, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you. All right, everyone. That's Josh coming in from the US, from Seattle, with his 2000 996 Porsche 911. Very special with the Aerokit, and even more special, it's an ocean blue metallic manual. And that's about it. Thanks for listening to the PorscheCooled Podcast. Bye for now.